Collin Yarbrough is coming. Collin grew up in our church. In fact, we sort of share a birthday because his family joined the church the first Sunday I was the pastor, and that's about 32 years ago. How old are you, Collin?
I'm 33.
33, okay. And we're good. Is that on now?
It's on.
I don't think it is. Okay, great, thank you. Collin has written a book. It's called Paved A Way, and the subtitle is scintillating: Infrastructure, Policy, and Racism in an American City.
Yeah.
But the book is really a revelation, one that first occurred to you and anyone who reads it will have, because, well, how did you stumble upon this, and what is the essence of your point in this book?
Yeah, so it started as a paper in a class I was taking last fall called Context and Impact of Design.
SMU.
At SMU, yes. And the class was looking at housing projects, chairs, all these sorts of things that are designed in our lives and what are the impacts on our lives. And so we had to write a paper about some sort of design thing in Dallas. And one of the things listed was Central Expressway. I was like, oh, I use it every day. I don't think much about it. Might be interesting to find out some little tidbits about it. And little did I know that would change the course of my life. And that happened when I stumbled on a New York Times article talking about the 1990s reconstruction of the highway, which is the one we have today. And during the reconstruction, they had to move 1,127 bodies of people who were formerly enslaved from a freedmen's cemetery that's between Lemon and Hall to make space for the expansion of the highway. And there was something so fundamentally wrong about that we would disturb the eternal peace and rest of black bodies to make space for a highway that primarily served white suburbs in Dallas.
So this city that we love so much and that has given so much to us, like every city in America, the story is not always favorable.
No.
When you dig deep, because as in the history of our country generally, we've always been trying to escape from the legacy of slavery and from segregation and those sorts of things. Looking at this is not an attempt to just to crucify the past or those who were there, but to become aware of how we came to be where we are. And besides Central Expressway, there's a lot more in here about how Dallas developed. And one of the chapters you title Unfair Park.
Yeah.
Fair Park, Unfair Park.
Yeah.
Say a little more about that.
Yeah, sure. Fair Park is one of the places where I think in the research that I did up to this point so far was like the most clear evidence of disenfranchisement by the city of Dallas to remove black people from their homes in the Fair Park neighborhood. And that happened in the 1960s to create the parking lots on kind of the southeastern edge of Fair Park, because that would give white people a more comfortable fair-going experience. There was a focus group that indicated that was the problem. And so they said, great, well, we'll remove all these black homes on the edge of Fair Park, and they did that by restricting building permits for several years, which drove the land prices down, and the city came in through eminent domain, bought those homes, and gave appraisals about 3 times as much to white homeowners as they did to black homeowners, and then cleared the neighborhood and built the parking lots that we have today.
So these are some examples of how things were intentionally designed in Dallas to favor some and not others. But I think, one of the questions that you address in here is not just how things were and are, but what is now possible? How might we repave or pave a new way, right? Because history is not destiny. So you suggest some of those things. What are some of those ways that we could begin to redress the injustices here?
Yeah, and a lot of it comes from understanding, whether it's us as a church or us as a city, understanding that racial geography that exists, that everything at our city is built on, that comes from, it's almost cliche at this point, redlining and discriminatory segregation and all these things, but all of our context and the status quo that we have today is built on that. So it's really important that we continue to interrogate and understand our history, and then move to action from that history to stand in solidarity with neighborhoods like South and West Dallas that are still experiencing environmental racism, racist zoning practices, and are still having their neighborhoods disenfranchised today, right now. And standing with them, getting involved with the neighborhood groups, following them on Facebook. It's just knowing the issues that are outside of your neighborhood can do a world of difference in engaging in the local fights here in Dallas.
Last question, Collin. You came upon all of this as a result of going to seminary at SMU, at Perkins.
Yeah.
And that's kind of an interesting story in itself, because the class was actually engineering, which is your background and is your special interest here. But it actually moves us to consider, why are we standing here in a church? And why was it at seminary that led you ultimately to understand these things? What does the gospel have to do with work like this, with understanding our community and doing something about it?
Yeah, and I like to joke a little bit tongue-in-cheek that seminary is the reason I left seminary. I didn't last very long in seminary, but I was taking classes, Old Testament classes from our own Jack Levison, who teaches Old Testament at Perkins, and taking classes in church and social context. And what I began to see were all of these underpinnings of what a just city and kingdom looks like, one that doesn't marginalize people in the community, doesn't create high differentials of privilege and power. And anytime that happened that I saw throughout the biblical text, nothing good came of it. And I was probably already primed a lot because I grew up watching my own mother do her doctoral work on white privilege and racism in the church. And so as I began to see all of these bits and pieces throughout my life, and then having that put into context with the engineering work, everything began to coalesce into this dialect of justice, of how the church and the city are one and the same, and you can't escape it.
Well, thank you for your work and for your prophetic words to us about this. I want to say to all of you, the book is called Paved A Way. You can get it in all the usual places. And if you are interested in becoming more involved at Wilshire and caring about these things, Heather Mustaine, our associate pastor, and Abby Adcox, who leads our advocacy committee, would be the person to talk to. Thank you so much, Collin.
Thanks, George.
Okay.